Hi, it's Rich Hoffman here. Been a lot of talk about the Trump speech at the DOJ, March 2025. Can't blame him for doing it. I think he's been very restrained, given the nature of what led up to it. I think everybody needs to remember something in regards to the events that occurred from really his first term, 2016 to 2020, and then 2020 to 2024. All this talk about Biden had no understanding of what he was signing. There was an auto-sign kind of thing, so he had aides and everybody signing documents for him. We didn't have control of the presidency. It was wrestled away from us through election fraud. And when Trump mentioned Mark Elias in his speech as someone who was very, very vicious and evil, as an attorney who challenged a lot of the election fraud issues, drove it through, allowed the election fraud, allowed the theft of the presidency to occur, as an attorney on behalf of the left way of thinking, which put Joe Biden in office, he broke the law. Mark Elias committed sedition in some of the worst ways possible. And it would be considered treasonous what he did under the harshest punishment you can conjure up, if you could prove that he did what he did in alliance to foreign enemies. Now remember, we have an obligation to protect our Constitution from foreign and domestic enemies. So people from within our country are trying to undermine our way of life, our enemies. They're just as bad enemies as foreign adversaries. So when you start connecting the money trail to Mark Elias and what he did to allow election fraud to occur with legal challenges, which removed Trump from office and put Joe Biden in, and then we had 4 years of really nobody running the presidency, no one from the people's house representing the people in an election. You've done a major crime. So Trump is right to point it out and to mention it, and anyone who's saying, well, he put a mark on his back by mentioning him in the speech, I think Trump has been very restrained in what he could do if he could enact his executive powers to punish enemies that not just went after him and tried to ruin his life, but cause sedition in our country. And again, it would be treasonous if you could show a connection to those who were purposely trying to undermine our country, which you could argue, I think, very valiantly that was exactly what Mark Elias had in mind, and the people who supported putting Joe Biden in office. And then there's that Mark Pomerantz guy that went to work for went after Trump's businesses and held him up in court, built up the case in New York against Trump, and the show trial that went on there. I mean, these are people who Trump mentioned in his DOJ speech. These are people who openly committed sedition, because the purpose there was everybody knew Trump won. The Mark Elias case, they knew the ground game. I knew the ground game. People who have access to this kind of information could see the precinct picture. And everybody knew where the election fraud occurred. And Mark Elias saw the same information that everybody else saw that knew. He used legal gymnastics to try and push it off so it would get off the front page, create some legal victories by stalemating through the courts, a proper analysis. But it's not that he didn't know or anybody else knew. And they knew that Trump had won that election, and they wanted to seal him away so he couldn't come back. So then this Mark Pomerantz went to work for the New York cases to help the Alvin Bragg and Letitia James and all those kinds of insurgents destroy Trump and put him in jail, abuse the law in every way you could possibly abuse it, and hope that they were going to get away with it. And they didn't get away with it. People voted for Trump anyway, despite all the efforts they used to destroy Trump, put him in jail, destroy his businesses, so it would be a lesson to the world not to challenge this administrative state system that they were in control of. And you could say very easily that that's a treasonous foreign domestic power within the constructs of the United States that was trying to overthrow the government. I could say about the same thing about the labor unions. The Black Lives Matter mural that was on 16th Street in front of all those labor unions at the head of the White House, so you could see it from the windows, is an obvious attempt. This isn't a political group under the protection of free speech to articulate a message and have a debate in public. This is an attempt to intimidate and coerce behavior through force. That was the message behind the whole Black Lives Matter mural. This is exactly what Mark Elias was trying to do with election fraud, and this is why they were prosecuting him in New York. All these people who were involved in these things that Trump mentioned as DOJ speech were openly trying to create sedition to destroy our country, and they deserve to be punished. And I think you have to. And I think his message was, look, I'm here, I'm in charge. This is, as an executive, as the executive leader, all of these offices work for me, and I'm here to make a declaration of that. And that's the way it's supposed to have been all along. And the abuses of power that went on over the last 8 years, essentially, were monstrous. And if the only people who got in trouble for it were people like Mark Elias, that wouldn't be enough. But for people to look at that and say, well, is Trump trying to intimidate Mark Elias? He was just practicing free speech and he's just trying to have a check on power. No, he was committing sedition, open sedition. And everyone who participated in allowing that election fraud issue to go through was committing sedition. Openly working against the United States. This was not a free speech argument. This wasn't a debate over whether or not people liked Trump or didn't like Trump, or they wanted to see Hillary elected, or they want to see Joe Biden elected. This is not that. You have to have honest elections. You can't undermine the system. Otherwise, you can't know what people really want. You can't know who's really supposed to be in the White House. You're undermining a republic form of government purposely, and that's what Mark Elias did. So Trump had a right to call him out and to articulate that these are evil, bad people who did really malicious, horrible things, and they can't stand. And there are investigations into what everybody did. It's not like Trump has to go out and punish anybody himself for it, but his Justice Department and all the aspects of power that are now controlled, because he is back in the White House, and not because they let him. They did everything they could to stop him, except for personally inflicting violence. But they inspired violence, and you could say that a lot of their antagonisms, a lot of their meanderings through the media is what provoked the assassins who did try to kill Trump to try and kill Trump. The dog whistle was out there; they were blowing it, and there was nothing fair about what they did during those years and trying to destroy somebody who was challenging their power. And now he's controlling the Department of Justice. They did everything they could to keep that from happening, and he's in there anyway. And there's going to be ramifications for what they did. You don't get to go out there and cry foul when you've done everything you can to destroy a person, and then they turn the levers of power on you for enforcement of the crimes that you committed, Mark Elias, to undermine the entire system through sedition, and that you're going to walk away and get away from it. You ought to be looking over your back. You ought to be wondering what's going to happen next. Where's the hammer going to come down? Because you know what you did, and you know how you robbed the American people of at least 4 years of controlling their own White House with their representative, because you participated in covering up election fraud. You perpetuated it. And then to keep you from coming back because you knew the truth, you had this Pomeranz guy go in and try to destroy Trump's businesses so he could not defend himself, and rob him of his income and his legacy. Destroy him utterly, not just by putting him in jail, but by stealing all his assets from him and his family in the future, which is not how it works in the United States, and it can't be allowed to stand. And the people who got involved in all that stuff have to be punished. And in my mind, they should have been punished already. I think Trump's being way too nice. He's being nice and even keeled. And that's why he's president. That's why he was elected, because he does have enough of a restraint on himself to let the process play out. But when it comes to going to the Department of Justice and pointing out that these are people who did bad things, not just to me, they did bad things to the American system of government. And what they did was commit sedition in every way that you define it. And they did it knowingly, and they didn't plan on ever getting caught because they thought they had so much control of the system that they would ride off into the sunset and we would all have to follow whatever they did as leaders of the administrative state and ultimately the deep state. They believe they were a fourth branch of government that did not report to the American people, and that if people voted against their wishes, they would just get into the courts and manipulate the results, and they put Joe Biden in, put him on auto sign, and get a bunch of 23-year-old aides to sign for the president because they did not respect that we, the people of the United States of America, vote for our representatives and expect them to do our business from the White House. They were going to undermine that because we picked one guy, they wanted him out, so they plotted to get rid of him through all kinds of legal gymnastics, and then they sought out to destroy him so he could never come back again. And that can't be allowed to stand, and it won't be. So in the months and weeks to come, there's going to be a lot of discussions that Mark Elias and people like him aren't going to like, but you shouldn't have done it. You should have done it to begin with. You shouldn't have gone down that path and opened that door, because now people have to be punished for it. And if you don't punish them, then you invite them to do it again, and we never want to see this kind of nonsense again within the United States. And I think you have to send a message that lasts for the next 200 or 300 years. Because failure to do that invites them to do it next decade. You have to make it so overt, the punishment, that nobody tries it again. And that's the only way to keep the system honest, is by punishing those who did the worst. And Mark Elias knows just how bad he was and what he did and what it cost our country through his seditious acts. And that is the correct definition of his behavior. And it's not something that people have a heart to go pursue, because a lot of people could be guilty of the same kind of act once you define it in such a court case. But that's what it is, and that's what we have to call it. And there are people who have performed tasks even less than what Mark Elias did that will be considered seditious as well. And the maximum punishment that the law will allow has to be enacted to prevent that kind of behavior from happening again. And it's our task to make sure that happens. And it's going to. Anyway, it's Rich Hoffman here. Share, subscribe, make tomorrow a better day. If you haven't read my book, The Gunfighter's Guide to Business, I think you'll love it. Anyway, have a good day. See you later.